For the famous battle segment, we'll be looking at the battle for the Citadel, the final climactic conflict fought by Belegar as he attempted to capture Karak 8 Peaks during the 4th expedition. The dwarves marched down from the secret path discovered around Karak, carefully approaching the northern entrance to Karak 8 Peaks as the sun began to rise. Their path wound through numerous grotesque totems, fashioned from the brutal remains of those who had tried to enter the hold in the past. As the Dawi passed through the ruin of the North Gate, the enemy at last came into view. Hundreds of goblins from the Darklands swarmed around the ruins of Vala Azra Ungul's surface city, blissfully unaware that the true king of Karak 8 Peaks had come. Enraged at the desecration laid out before him, Belegar's throng descended like a thunderbolt upon the Groby encampment. The heir of Lund butchered his way across the city as the greenskins scrambled to organize some type of response. Crude spear chukkas opened fire from dilapidated towers, though the goblin war machines either misfired or proved far too inaccurate to be useful. As Ironhammer pressed forward alongside the Grim Brotherhood, he noted dozens of wolf chariots supported by riders hurtling towards him. With a simple gesture from his hammer between strikes, the throng of Clan Angren immediately reformed into a colossal shield wall to counter this new threat. While the cavalry may have concerned him somewhat on the open battlefields of the Badlands, the ruins of Karak 8 Peaks proved terrible terrain for mounted troops. The wolves funneled into narrow channels in hopes of striking at the dwarfs, but with a signal from Belegar, a deafening boom rang out as scores of Thunderers opened fire supported by Trollhammer torpedoes. Those few goblins that survived the massacre found themselves isolated against a united front of Gromril shields and were butchered within seconds. The heir of Lund allowed himself a gruff laugh as his forces pursued the Groby towards the Citadel, standing at the back of the surface city. Easily in the best condition of the remaining structures, Belegar knew it would make the perfect position from which to begin his reclamation efforts. As his army marched closer with a throng of Karak Azul close behind, he noticed that the mighty doors were sealed shut. It caused him a moment's concern, as that had not been the case during the second expedition when he had last saw them, but there was little time for worry now. As his warriors massacred those goblins who were desperately trying to escape past the Citadel, Ironhammer met briefly with his engineers and gave them a simple order. Those gates needed to open. Now. Much as it pained them, the Dawi sappers planted black powder charges, and at the king's signal, a careful explosion tore open the way to the greenskins' fortified position. Belegar leapt forward, shouting "Kazook!" as he led his Ironbreakers into the Citadel's main hall. Waiting for them were hundreds upon hundreds of orcs, already organized into a greenskin's excuse for a shield wall. While the Gromril-clad Dawi were practically invulnerable against their foes' crude weaponry, the Urk had them outnumbered at least 3-1, and had more than enough muscle to compensate for their lack in equipment. The true king slowly pressed forwards, deflecting heavy-bladed choppas with the Shield of Defiance time and again. His hammer reaped a mighty tally, smashing apart thick orc skulls one by one, but there were far too many to make any meaningful progress this way. Thankfully, the rest of his plan worked out perfectly, as the bloodthirsty greenskins were far too preoccupied to notice the rune-concealed doors opening behind them. 40 rangers, who had been sent into the long-forgotten tunnels mapped out by Grunfin Goldgather, emerged undetected and set up a firing line with their crossbows. Belegar cried out, "Vengeance for Karak 8 Peaks!" and seconds later bolts began scything through the unprepared rear line. By the time the orcs realized what was happening, the Rangers had already emptied their ammunition into twitching corpses and charged into the exposed flank with axes swinging. Pincered between the wrath of King Belegar's warriors and the ambushing Rangers, the confused greenskins were slaughtered to an orc. When the last one keeled over after having its ribcage crushed by a headbutt from Ironhammer, he roared orders for the Dawi to immediately begin reinforcing their position. The initial fight had lasted hours, and already the sky had turned to dusk. Soon the sun would set, and with the rise of darkness, the true threat within Vala Azrul Ungol would be unleashed. "15 dwarves had been slain during the fighting, and over a score wounded who were being tended to by the healing rune magic of runesmith Draknar. But the battle was not yet over. The throngs of Clan Angrund and Karak Azul swiftly made their preparations, sealing off the side entrances with careful black powder detonations and debris, while the war machine trains were prepared. At the center of the hall and both forces, Thorik Ironbrow prepared his anvil of doom, with his assistant Craggy as he grumbled out orders. Belegar stood to the fore of the grim brotherhood, eyes narrowing as the last rays of sunlight faded behind Karak Yar. As night descended upon Karak 8 Peaks, a shrill war cry came from outside as thousands of dark-clothed bodies began to pour into the hall. Night goblins charged forward without any concern for tactics or strategy, among their number marching all sorts of bizarre beasts. As the motley horde came into range, the heir of Lund waved his hand, and the Dawi gun line answered. Organ guns blasted apart entire swaths of Groby, while cannons and bolt throwers tore through lumbering regiments of trolls. Flame cannons and iron drakes incinerated scores of greenskins as the horde continued charging forwards. The tide of goblins halted for a moment before lines connected, and collectively laughed as they shoved out drugged comrades carrying massive chained balls. Belegar shouted for his kin to brace as the fanatics came whirling towards them, and although a handful were felled by King Quarrelers, the remainder smashed into the dwarf shield wall. The king heard screams from down the line, but had to focus on his own troubles as one of the giggling mad Groby came spinning towards him. Trusting in his ancestors, Ironhammer carefully waited for the proper moment before stepping forwards and throwing all his weight behind his rune shield. The iron ball collided with the shield of defiance and stopped dead before falling to the ground with a thud. The confused night goblin hardly had time to consider the situation before being subsequently decapitated. Belegar stepped back into line among his hammerers and waited for the full brunt of the greenskin charge, his blood singing a fiery tale of vengeance. The night goblins crashed into his throng moments later, but for all their wickedness and superior numbers, they were no match. The dwarfs hunkered behind their shields until the assault was spent, and then lashed out with hammer and axe to deadly effect. The cowardly night goblins would briefly fall back before rallying to charge once more as endless reinforcements continued to pour into the Citadel. Belegar glanced down his battle line, ensuring all his lords and thanes kept a united front and allowed no openings for the Groby to exploit. Sure enough, to either side he saw nothing but proud shields presented and ready. Allowing himself a rare smile, the king knew no matter what, the Dawi of Karak 8 Peaks would not fall. The battle for the Citadel raged on for hours as the night goblins threw everything available to them against the entrenched Dawi. Rune Lord Thoric ominously striking his anvil of doom with mighty blows, to either reinforce the runes of the dwarf's equipment or incinerating scores of Groby with unleashed bolts of runic magic. King Belegar himself reaped a terrible toll on the Greenskins, the wrath of his ancestors granting him the endurance to continue fighting while the rest of his warriors rotated out. As the moons reached their zenith in the night sky, the Night Goblins finally broke off their assault and fled. Thousands upon thousands of Greenskins had been butchered, but as the sun rose that morning over Karak, not a single Groby drew breath in the surface city. Belegar had won, and the true king of Karak 8 Peaks had at long last returned.
Thank you for watching. On this channel we are putting together Total War cinematic battles and Warhammer lore videos. If you enjoyed this video and would like to support our work, you can now directly sponsor the channel through Patreon and help us in the making of more videos. Find the link in the description below, and see you on the next one.